There's a documentary about Corey Feldman that exists right now, that critics have reviewed, that's sitting on rental platforms for anyone to watch, and that Corey Feldman himself says he never actually agreed to. Not the concept, not the footage, not the release. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly how one of Hollywood's most famous child stars ended up being filmed without fully knowing what he was signing up for. Decades after he first tried to warn everyone about this exact kind of thing happening to kids in the industry.
I was abused in my home life, and I was forced to, basically be locked in a room all day learning songs, learning scripts, whatever, and I wasn't allowed to play, I wasn't allowed to eat, I wasn't allowed.
If you're into stories about the darker side of fame, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this video reach more people. And let's get into it right now. Corey Feldman didn't have a normal childhood. And honestly, almost nobody in this story did. He was working in front of a camera before most kids had even settled into elementary school. And by the time he hit his teenage years, he'd already appeared in some of the most beloved movies of the decade. The kind of films people still rewatch today and consider part of their own childhoods. He was kind of famous, where strangers recognized his face before he'd had the chance to figure out who he actually was outside of a script. That's the part people gloss over when they talk about child stars. It's not just early fame. It's early fame with almost no adult in the room actually looking out for him, surrounded instead by managers, handlers, and industry professionals who had a direct financial stake in keeping him working, keeping him likable, and keeping the cameras rolling. When you're a kid whose entire household income depends on you staying employable, the adults around you don't always have your best interests at the top of the list. Sometimes they do. But sometimes the version of you that gets protected isn't the real you. It's the version that keeps the checks coming in. And for a working child actor in that era, that distinction mattered a lot more than anyone was willing to admit at the time. Around that same time, he became close with another young actor, and the two of them ended up defining each other's public image for the rest of their lives. They were constantly together, on screen and off. Two teenage boys essentially raising themselves inside an industry that was making a fortune off of them, with paparazzi documenting their every move, and tabloids treating their friendship like its own kind of storyline. For a while, that friendship looked like the one steady thing either of them had. Two kids who at least understood what the other one was going through, because almost nobody else in their lives actually did. But underneath the magazine covers and the movie premieres, something else was happening. Something neither of them talked about publicly until years later. And something that ended up shaping the rest of Corey Feldman's life. Whatever stability that friendship gave them on the surface, it existed alongside a much darker reality that was unfolding at the exact same time, largely out of view of the cameras that were so obsessed with documenting everything else about their lives. Because here's the thing about that era of Hollywood. It wasn't just long hours and pushy parents. Feldman has said, publicly and repeatedly, that he and people around him experienced sexual abuse as children in the industry, at the hands of adults who had access to them because of their fame, not strangers. Not one-off predators operating in the shadows, people who were embedded in the same professional world that was making these kids famous in the first place. People who had every reason to believe they'd never actually face consequences. His friend struggled with addiction for years afterward and passed away far too young. A loss that Feldman has connected directly, in his own words over the years, to what happened to them as children. And Feldman has spent a huge chunk of his adult life saying the same thing, over and over, in different rooms, to different interviewers, on different platforms, hoping someone with actual power would finally listen. That what happened to them wasn't an isolated incident. That there were other kids. That there were adults in positions of power who knew, and who let it keep happening anyway, year after year. Because the machine around them was more interested in protecting itself than protecting the kids inside of it. Now, if you're picturing a story where a survivor comes forward and the industry takes it seriously, that is not what happened here. For years, when Corey Feldman tried to talk about this, the reaction from a lot of the entertainment press and a lot of the public wasn't concern, it was mockery. he became something of a punchline. People pointed to his unusual public persona, his strange interviews, his music career that plenty of critics never took seriously, and used all of that as a convenient reason to write off what he was actually saying, instead of separating the messenger from the message. That's a pattern worth noticing, because it shows up again and again in almost any industry with this kind of problem. The people who speak up first often aren't believed. Instead, they get quietly rebranded as unstable or difficult or desperate for attention, right up until enough other people come forward that ignoring it stops being an option. And by then, the person who spoke up first has usually already paid the price for it, in reputation, in career opportunities, in how seriously anyone takes anything they say afterward, regardless of whether they end up being right. If you've made it this far, drop a comment telling me which celebrity downfall story you want covered next. I read every single one, and it genuinely shapes what gets turned into a full video down the line. So for the better part of 2 decades, Corey Feldman existed in this strange, uncomfortable space. Not fully believed, not fully dismissed, mostly just talked about like a cautionary tale, instead of someone who might actually be telling the truth. He tried a lot of different approaches to get people to pay attention. He tried to crowdfund a film that would lay out everything he claimed to know. He sat through interview after interview, sometimes calm and measured, sometimes visibly frustrated at having to explain the same thing for the 100th time. And through most of it, the tone from a lot of outlets stayed painfully consistent. Less, let's actually look into this. More, can you believe this guy is still talking about this? Now, by the way, if this kind of story is exactly the type of content you're here for, the easiest way to make sure you never miss the next one is to hit subscribe. This channel is built around stories like this one, the real people's fame chewed up and never quite let go of. And subscribing is genuinely the simplest way to catch every single one the moment it goes live. Which brings us to the part of this story that's almost hard to believe, even by Hollywood standards. A film crew spent time following Corey Feldman during one of the rockier stretches of his adult life, capturing him on what's been described as a chaotic musical tour, alongside a group of young women, including his then wife. The footage is intimate, unflattering in places, and clearly filmed with the kind of access that only comes from someone believing the people behind the camera were genuinely on his side. It's since been compared by critics to other documentaries about self-destructive public figures, the kind where you watch someone fall apart in real time and quietly wonder who exactly signed off on filming it in the first place. Here's the part that makes this different from your average unflattering celebrity documentary, though. According to statements from Feldman's own representatives, he says he had no knowledge that this footage was actually being shaped into a full film, and that he didn't know about its release until it was already out in the world. His team put that claim in writing to the entertainment press. He didn't show up to the premiere, and at some point, his side sent a formal cease and desist letter, the kind of legal notice specifically meant to stop a release before it ever reaches an audience. That cease and desist was ignored. The documentary came out anyway, landing on demand, available for anyone to rent, featuring the same man who has spent years trying to get Hollywood to take his story seriously, now seemingly unable to stop a project built from footage of his own unraveling life. Reviewers who've watched it have described it as strange, uncomfortable, and at times almost impossible to distinguish from a scripted mockumentary, precisely because of how raw and unfiltered the footage is. That's usually a compliment for a documentary. In this case, it's also exactly the problem, because the person at the center of it says he never signed off on any of it being shown to the public in the first place. Quick break, because I want to point out something that ties this whole story together, and it's worth sitting with for a second. If you want to catch every video like this one the moment it drops, subscribing is the single easiest way to make that happen. This channel isn't about mocking people who fell from grace. It's about actually understanding how these situations happen in the first place. So if that's the kind of content you're here for, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. Here's the layer of this that makes it genuinely uncomfortable, instead of just another tabloid headline. Corey Feldman has spent a large chunk of his adult life saying, in one form or another, that Hollywood exploited him and the people around him when they were too young to have any real say over what was happening to their own lives and images. And in this new documentary, by his own account, footage of him during one of the roughest periods of his adult life ended up being packaged and sold to the public. Again, without what he says was his full knowledge or genuine consent over how it would ultimately be used. Whether or not you land on exactly who's responsible for that breakdown in communication, the pattern itself is the real story here. A man who built his entire public advocacy around the idea that he lost control of his own narrative as a child, apparently lost control of his own narrative again as a grown adult, in front of cameras he thought he could trust. And that's really the through line running underneath this entire story. It's not just about one documentary, or one tour, or one difficult decade. It's about what happens to people who become famous before they're old enough to protect themselves, and how often that same loss of control just keeps repeating throughout their whole lives, showing up in different forms, with different people surrounding them, but the same basic dynamic underneath it all. Fame handed Corey Feldman a childhood most people only dream about. And it also seems to have quietly stripped away his ability to fully control his own story, over and over again, well into adulthood, right up to now. So where does that leave things at this point? Corey Feldman is still out there, still making music, still doing interviews, still, by most accounts, trying to get people to actually listen to what he's been saying for years. Some of what he warned about has aged into something closer to vindication, as more stories about abuse in the industry have surfaced from other people entirely, on separate timelines, with separate accusers. But he's also still, somehow, ending up in headlines where he says his own life and image were used without him fully knowing about it. That's not really an ending. It's more of a pattern. And honestly, it might be the most accurate way to understand this entire story. If you want another story like this one, about the exact moments where fame stopped protecting someone and started being used against them instead, I've got more of these coming, and some of the names might genuinely surprise you. Make sure you're subscribed so you catch it the second it goes live. And I'll see you in the next one.